This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one country or one protest or one shipment of oil. This is about a system that believed it had found a way to outrun risk and quietly, methodically, built that risk into its own foundation. For years, this system looked stable, predictable, efficient. It delivered growth. It delivered calm. It delivered the illusion that chaos could be outsourced. But systems don't fail loudly at first. They thin, they strain, they stop absorbing shock. And when that happens, nothing snaps all at once. Instead, pressure starts moving from the edges, from places most people aren't watching. If you stay with me, you'll see why what looks like distant unrest is already inside the machinery that keeps the global economy breathing, and why, once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Because this isn't about what just happened. It's about what can no longer be held back. And the next piece of this story explains who is actually in control now and who is not. When people look for power, they usually look in the wrong place. They look at leaders, they look at speeches, they look at elections and summits and handshakes. But systems like this are not run by personalities. They are run by dependencies. What controls the system now is not ideology, not diplomacy, not even money by itself. It is flow, the continuous movement of something so ordinary that we forget to name it, until it slows, until it hesitates, until it stops. For decades, this system trained itself to believe that supply would always answer demand, that if one door closed, another would open, that markets would adapt faster than politics could interfere. So it stopped paying full price. It stopped spreading risk. It stopped asking whether reliability mattered more than cost. Instead, it optimized. It concentrated. It narrowed its margin for error. And that worked until the system stopped dealing with variables and started dealing with volatility. Because when control depends on uninterrupted flow, the moment uncertainty enters, power begins to leak away. And the next shift, the quiet one, explains how this vulnerability was normalized long before anyone called it a crisis. There was no announcement when the shift happened, no emergency meeting, no moment anyone pointed to and said, "This is different now." That's what made it dangerous. Before, risk was treated as temporary. A disruption meant adjustment. A shock meant diversification. Instability was something you planned around. Now, instability became part of the baseline. Before, supply chains were built to bend. Now they are built to run hot, lean, precise, unforgiving. Every link optimized for cost. Every buffer shaved down. Every backup quietly removed because it looked inefficient on paper. And over time, what used to be a contingency became the core strategy. Shortcuts became structure. Exceptions became routine. The system told itself this was sophistication, that it was smarter now, more agile. But slow change doesn't feel like danger. It feels like progress. Until the day the environment changes faster than the system can adapt. And when that happens, the first warning sign is not collapse, it's hesitation. The next moment, the first real shock, shows how thin that margin had already become. The first shock did not arrive as a headline about the system itself. It never does. It arrived as unrest, as streets filling faster than authorities expected, as prices rising faster than wages could follow. On paper, the core function still worked. Production continued. Exports moved. Ships still left port. But beneath that surface, something essential disappeared. Confidence. Workers began to hesitate. Transport slowed in small, deniable ways. Insurance costs rose. Delays stacked on delays. None of this looked catastrophic on its own. That's the trap. Because this system does not break when flow stops completely. It breaks when reliability erodes just enough that every decision costs more time, more money, more risk. If you're still with me, pause for a second. Because this is the moment most analyses miss. When the story isn't about chaos, but about friction. And friction compounds. What looked like an isolated shock was already transmitting stress outward into places that had built their stability on the assumption that this would never happen. And that leads directly to the mechanism that made this exposure unavoidable. Here is the part that is usually hidden behind charts and technical language. This system does not fail because supply disappears. It fails because risk is transferred up the chain, Cost is minimized. Down the chain, damage is absorbed. The benefit flows upward, the volatility flows outward. When supply is cheap, the system rewards concentration, specialized infrastructure, tailored logistics, facilities designed for one specific input, one predictable stream. That efficiency creates lock-in. Once you build around a particular flow, switching becomes expensive, slow, disruptive. So when instability appears upstream, the system doesn't adapt. It waits, it absorbs, it pretends the shock is temporary. And while it waits, the burden shifts to insurers who raise premiums, to shippers who hesitate, to refiners who run mismatched inputs at lower efficiency, to planners who drain reserves meant for emergencies, not routines. No single actor causes the damage. No single decision looks reckless. That's what makes it systemic. The people who benefit keep benefiting. The people who absorb risk don't get a choice. And when this mechanism accelerates, it doesn't announce itself. It shows up as the second shock, faster, sharper, harder to contain. The second shock doesn't wait. It overlaps. Shipments arrive late, then not at all. Routes change. Paperwork stalls. Coverage vanishes overnight. What used to be predictable becomes conditional. If this port stays open, if that vessel is cleared, if nothing changes before morning, costs spike, margins vanish, schedules are rewritten again and again. This is not collapse. This is worse, because the system is still running, just inefficiently, just nervously. Every workaround adds friction. Every delay amplifies pressure somewhere else. Emergency measures become routine. Routine measures stop working. And now the system is burning its safety net to stay upright. Nothing dramatic happens on screen. No single moment you can point to. But the pace quickens. Decisions shorten. Tolerance shrinks. And at the end of this chain, someone always absorbs the hit. The next part is where this stops being abstract and starts being personal. Here's where you enter the story, not as a spectator, as a variable. Because when systems like this strain, they don't fail where the pressure starts. They fail where flexibility runs out. You feel it as prices that don't quite make sense anymore, as delays that have no clear explanation, as costs passed along quietly, one step at a time. Fuel gets tighter, transport costs rise, factories adjust shifts, then cut them. Nothing dramatic, nothing that triggers alarms, just enough disruption to change behavior. You hesitate before spending, companies hesitate before hiring, planners hesitate before committing. That hesitation is contagious. If you're still watching, this is why it matters, because this isn't about distant instability. It's about how global stress is translated into everyday friction without ever being named. And while individuals adjust, the system keeps moving risk downward. What feels personal is actually structural. And the next turn shows why this pressure no longer stays contained inside one economy or one border. At this point, the strain stops being local, because systems like this don't exist in isolation. They overlap, they stack, they transmit. When one supply line becomes unreliable, pressure doesn't disappear. It moves, cargo is rerouted, prices shift, other buyers start competing for the same replacements. What was once a regional adjustment becomes a global contest. Shipping lanes tighten, insurance markets react. Secondary suppliers raise prices, not out of greed, but because they can. And suddenly, decisions made in one capital begin reshaping calculations everywhere else. Allies reassess commitments. Competitors probe weaknesses. Neutral players pick sides without saying so out loud. This is how economic stress becomes strategic leverage. Not through confrontation, through scarcity. And once scarcity enters the system, trust erodes faster than supply. No one knows which contract will be honored, which shipment will arrive, which rule will change next. The system keeps running, but now it's reactive. And when multiple pressures converge like this, the future stops being a straight line. It splits. From here, the system only has three possible paths. The first is adjustment. Slow, expensive, deliberate. It means paying more, spreading risk, rebuilding buffers that were stripped away years ago. It works, but only if pressure eases long enough to allow it. The second path is erosion. Quieter, more familiar. The system stays upright, but weaker. Margins stay thin, fixes stay temporary, emergency measures become permanent features. Nothing breaks all at once. But resilience fades, and every new shock costs more than the last. Then there's the third path, rupture. Not collapse in the dramatic sense, but a moment when multiple stresses align, when substitution fails, when confidence evaporates faster than reserves can compensate. In that scenario, decisions are no longer economic. They're political. And once that line is crossed, control changes hands very quickly. Which path this system takes is not predetermined. But it is no longer theoretical, because the conditions that make rupture possible are no longer rare. They're accumulating. And that leaves one final question. What happens when the illusion of stability finally runs out? Here's the part that doesn't resolve cleanly. Systems like this don't announce when they've crossed the line. They keep functioning until suddenly they don't. By the time certainty disappears, adjustment is no longer cheap. By the time rupture is visible, it's already underway. What failed here wasn't planning. It was the belief that risk could be permanently outsourced, that instability could be contained somewhere else, that efficiency could substitute for resilience. That belief is now under pressure. And pressure has a way of revealing what was always fragile. If you're still with me, don't take this as a prediction. Take it as a warning signal, because the most dangerous moment in any system is not collapse. It's the period right before, when everything still appears to work. If you want to understand where this goes next, you'll need to watch what happens when cost stops being the primary concern and security takes its place. That shift is already starting. And in the next part of this story, we'll follow what happens when economic leverage turns into something far more direct. Stay with me. You're going to want to see what breaks first.